Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something a little intoxicating. Literally. You've probably heard people say, humans have always wanted to get high. But what if I told you that's not just a modern quirk? It's one of the oldest, most universal human instincts. From ancient firesides to gold-covered temples, people have always been looking for ways to bend reality, to see beyond the edges of ordinary life, to find gods, visions, or just a little peace after a long day of hunting mammoths. And before you relax too much, fair warning, you probably won't survive this one sober. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment your location and your local time below. I love seeing where my night owls are tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You can almost hear it, the crackling of a distant campfire, the slow rhythm of a drum. You're sitting among a circle of people wrapped in furs, the air thick with smoke and mystery. The night sky above is endless, glittering with stars that seem closer than they should be. Someone, the tribe's shaman, tosses something strange into the fire. It hisses, pops, and releases a heavy, sweet scent that makes your head feel lighter, your heart beats slower. Welcome to humanity's first high. Long before anyone rolled up a leaf or brewed a beer, our ancestors were already experimenting, maybe by accident, maybe by fate. They discovered that certain plants, resins, and fumes could make them feel different, a little more connected to the unseen. Maybe that's why the first high wasn't about pleasure. It was about the divine. Scholars still argue whether this search for altered states began as a religious practice or just curiosity gone wild. Some believe early humans observed animals eating fermented fruit or strange plants and decided to copy them. Imagine watching a goat stumbling around, eyes half open, clearly having the time of its life. You'd probably wonder what it just ate too. One of the earliest clues we have comes from ancient burial sites where archaeologists found burnt remains of psychoactive plants mixed with ashes and bones. These weren't random bonfires. They were ceremonial. Picture it. Smoke rising toward the heavens, people dancing, chanting, believing that each puff carried their souls a little closer to the gods. Strange, isn't it? The very first drug trip might have been a spiritual elevator ride. No bouncers, no club music, just the stars, the smoke, and silence. And here's the oddest part. Many of these early rituals didn't involve ingesting anything directly. They inhaled the air around burning plants. They believed the smoke itself carried divine messages. The word inspiration literally comes from inspirare, meaning to breathe in spirit. Maybe that's not just poetic. Maybe it's literal history. Some historians think that the earliest shamans were both doctors and drug dealers. Though that's putting it crudely, they were explorers of consciousness. They tested roots, flowers, and even molds to find which ones made the world shimmer. And the moment they did, they claimed it was a message from beyond. Was it the gods? Was it chemistry? Scholars still argue whether the first religion began as the first high. Imagine it. You're sitting there, eyes wide, hearing the fire whisper. The smoke curls upward, and in its flicker, faces appear. Ancestors, spirits, memories. Maybe the boundary between real and unreal wasn't as strict back then. Maybe it still isn't. That's the thing about humanity. Even before writing, before farming, before soap or sandals, we already wanted to transcend, to break free, to find something that made existence feel lighter. And as the flames die down, you can still smell that strange mixture of burnt resin and hope in the air. You don't know it yet, but this moment, this single campfire, will echo across thousands of years, shaping rituals, religions, and even the way you think about what's real. The smoke fades, the stars blink, and somewhere deep inside, humanity takes its first collective breath of escape. The fire has dimmed, but the air still hums with something alive. A low, rhythmic chant, like breath made into sound. You feel the smoke curling through your lungs, the night air thick and slow. Someone across the fire begins to sway, eyes rolled back, voice trembling between human and something else. And in that moment, you realize this isn't just a ritual. It's a journey. You're watching the birth of the shaman. The first travelers between worlds weren't wearing feathers and beads for decoration. They were survival gear for the soul. The ancient shaman was the bridge between the visible and invisible. Every village had one, the person brave enough to eat the strange root, to inhale the mysterious smoke, to let their mind dissolve in order to bring back healing, prophecy, or power. Some historians believe these shamans were humanity's first scientists, testing, recording, experimenting, and yes, sometimes overdosing spectacularly. You can imagine the process. Try that plant. Silence. Okay, not that one. But the ones who survived became legends. They discovered herbs that calmed the mind, roots that cured pain, and mixtures that opened what they called the door between worlds. One of the most famous ancient practices was the breath trance. You'd sit in a sealed hut, a fire burning in the center, strange herbs tossed into the flames. You'd breathe deeply, eyes closed, until the smoke wasn't just around you, it was you. Then, as your mind loosened, you'd begin to see the unseen, ancestors, gods, spirits, maybe even your own future. Archaeologists have found residue from burnt herbs and resins like juniper, acacia, and henbane in prehistoric caves. These weren't just for warmth or cooking. The locations were chosen carefully, narrow chambers, where smoke could linger and overwhelm the senses. Imagine the walls glowing with flickering firelight, the air so thick you could barely breathe, and suddenly you're flying. Or at least you think you are. Scholars still argue whether these early flights were hallucinations or deliberate altered states. But when every culture across continents develops something similar, smoke huts, sweat lodges, trance fires, you start to see a pattern. Humanity was chasing transcendence before it even had a word for it. And the tools were simple: smoke, fire, breath. There's something oddly poetic about that our first trip was through air, that the same breath keeping you alive could also take you somewhere else entirely. Now imagine being there. You sit inside the smoky hut, eyes watering, skin damp with heat. The drumbeat grows faster, echoing inside your skull. Someone's chanting in a language older than memory. You can't tell if the sound is coming from them or from the walls themselves. Then a vision. Maybe it's the shape of an animal, maybe the face of someone long dead. You reach out, but your hand feels miles away. When you finally stumble outside, gasping for clean air, the night looks different. The stars shimmer with new meaning. Every sound feels connected. Your heartbeat, the crickets, the wind. You've returned, but not the same. It's easy to dismiss these moments as primitive hallucinations. But think about it. These experiences shaped entire mythologies. The concept of spirit journeys, soul flight, animal guides, all of it came from these smoke-drenched trances. And here's the quirky detail. In some regions, shamans used resin from trees that grew only after lightning strikes. They believed it captured the breath of the heavens. Burn that, and you weren't just inhaling smoke, you were inhaling divine power. That obsession with the sky, the fire, the unseen, it's still in you. Every time you stare at a flame or watch smoke twist upward, part of your brain recognizes something ancient, something shared. So when you breathe in, and the air feels heavy with memory, maybe it's not just oxygen filling your lungs, maybe it's history itself. The same breath your ancestors once took to step beyond the ordinary. The night grows quiet again. The fire dies down to embers. Somewhere a shaman hums softly, smiling in the dark, because they've gone where no one else dares. And for a few shimmering moments, they've brought back the impossible. The next time you open your eyes, the world smells of salt and the sea. Waves crash against a rocky shore, and the wind whips your hair like a living thing. You're not in a forest hut anymore. You're standing on the edge of the ancient Mediterranean, where people believed the gods themselves lived in the foam of the sea. Here, high on a sun-drenched cliff, a group of figures move in rhythm. They're Greeks, or maybe Phoenicians. It's hard to tell. But what they're doing looks half religious, half intoxicated. Their eyes are wide, their laughter wild. And in the center of it all, an earthen jug filled with a dark red liquid passes from hand to hand. Congratulations, you've just crashed an ancient wine ritual. Long before weed or beer, wine was humanity's favorite passport to the divine. But this wasn't your quiet Friday night Merlot situation. The earliest wines were thick, potent, and often spiked with all kinds of extras: herbs, honey, opium, or crushed flowers. Drinking wasn't about getting tipsy. It was about getting holy. You sip, and it hits harder than you expect. Sweet, smoky, strangely numbing. The world tilts, the horizon bends, and suddenly the air feels alive with invisible shapes. The people around you are dancing, but it's not random. It's synchronized, ritualized, the dance of Dionysus. Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, madness, and ecstasy. He wasn't just about drunken revelry. He represented the tearing down of boundaries. between human and God, between order and chaos, between the body and the spirit. His followers believed that in intoxication they touched the divine. Enthusiasmos, they called it. Literally, the God within. You weren't losing control when you drank. You were letting something greater take over. It sounds dramatic, but the archaeological evidence backs it up. Ancient amphorae, those clay wine jugs found in Greece, Egypt and Anatolia still contain traces of herbs like myrtle, thyme, and even hallucinogenic plants like datura and mandrake. Basically, ancient wine was more like liquid LSD than a dinner table drink. You can picture it, the flickering torchlight, the pounding drums, the smell of sea air and sweat. Someone pours wine over an altar stone. Someone else howls at the moon. The boundary between reality and dream thins until you can't tell which one you're standing in. Scholars still argue whether these Dionysian rites were religious enlightenment or organized chaos. Some claim they were dangerous, even outlawed. Others say they were the foundation for later mystical traditions, like the Eleusinian Mysteries, where initiates drank a special brew called kykeon. Kykeon wasn't just barley and water. Modern chemical tests suggest it contained ergot, a fungus that grows on grain, and the natural source of LSD. Yep, ancient. Greeks might have been tripping centuries before acid was a thing, and they did it in the name of revelation. Imagine standing in that torchlit temple, surrounded by chanting, feeling your heart hammer as your vision starts to shimmer. You look down at your hands and see faint golden light pulsing under your skin. You hear laughter, or maybe it's thunder. You remember that myth where Dionysus turned sailors into dolphins? And for a heartbeat you think, maybe you could be next. Here's the funny part. The Greeks weren't ashamed of any of this. They saw intoxication as balance. Apollo represented logic, music, and structure. Dionysus represented emotion, chaos, and transformation. Together, they kept humanity whole. You, right now, with your half-sober thoughts and your half-dreaming eyes, you're walking that same line. And while the Greeks refined it into poetry and theater, other cultures were doing something similar. In Egypt, priests inhaled blue lotus smoke, claiming it opened the eye of Ra. In Sumeria, worshippers used fermented honey, thamid, to speak to the gods. And in India, yogis drank soma, a mysterious liquid described as glowing like the sun and granting immortality. No one knows exactly what soma was. Scholars still argue. Maybe it was a mix of hallucinogenic mushrooms, ephedra, and milk. Maybe it was something else entirely. But the message was always the same. To get closer to the divine, you had to change your consciousness. You had to cross the threshold. And tonight, as you stand under that Mediterranean moon, surrounded by laughing strangers and shimmering wine, you start to understand the logic. The world is beautiful, but it's not enough. You crave the mystery behind it. You want to see what's beyond. The wine in your hand feels warm, alive, ancient. You take another sip, and for a moment, you can almost hear Dionysus himself laughing softly, not mocking, just amused. As if he's saying, "You get it now." You wake up surrounded by dust and drums. The air smells of dry earth, sweat, and smoke from burning herbs. The sun hangs low, painting everything in amber. You're somewhere in the middle of an ancient desert. Babylon, maybe. Or Sumer. The river glimmers in the distance, and reeds sway lazily in the warm wind. Here, intoxication isn't just a pastime. It's a sacred duty. You're watching a group of men and women gather around a massive clay vat, stirring something thick and foamy with wooden paddles. They're making the world's oldest beer. Yep, beer came long before your modern pints and hops. Around 6,000 years ago, the Sumerians, the same folks who gave us writing, were brewing barley mash mixed with dates and honey. They called it the drink of the gods. And unlike the clean, crisp beers we know, theirs was chunky, cloudy, and sipped through long straws to avoid the floating grains. You take a cautious sip from a reed straw and it's strange, sweet, earthy, slightly sour. It's not delicious, but it's alive. And in that moment, you're part of something ancient, one of humanity's first collective highs. The priests here believed that beer was a gift from Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing. They even wrote her a hymn, one of the earliest surviving recipes in the world. You can picture it, a temple courtyard filled with golden light, jars lined up in perfect symmetry, and a statue of the goddess herself, carved from alabaster, her hands forever offering a bowl of frothy liquid. As the people drink, the mood shifts. Laughter grows louder, movements looser. Someone starts clapping, someone else sings. The rhythm builds until the entire courtyard pulses with sound. And then, Like clockwork, and the chanting starts. They're calling out names of gods. Enki, Inanna, Utu. You feel the hair on your arms rise as the chant echoes against the mud brick walls. The beer isn't just making them drunk, it's making them divine. In this world, intoxication is communication. You don't need to pray quietly. You drink and sing your way into the gods' attention. It's easy to romanticize this, but there's something deeply human about it. For these ancient brewers, alcohol wasn't just escape, it was connection. With each sip, they bridged the gap between body and spirit, earth and sky. Archaeologists have found remnants of these beer brewing vats in ancient temples, along with pictographs of women, always women, making and serving it. In fact, brewing was considered a sacred feminine craft for thousands of years, before men commercialized it. You wonder what those early priestesses thought when they saw their people dancing and laughing after a long day in the sun. Did they feel power? Joy? Maybe both. You wander past the temple's edge into the open desert. The horizon ripples with heat. The air hums with unseen energy. You spot a small group of shepherds sitting under a fig tree, passing around a clay bowl filled with another mystery liquid, something white and milky. They call it haoma. If that sounds familiar, it's because haoma is the Persian cousin of soma, the legendary drink of the gods from ancient India. It was said to grant strength, courage, and spiritual clarity, the ultimate divine buzz. Scholars still argue what was actually in it. Some say ephedra, some say cannabis. Others think it was a psychoactive plant that's now extinct. You take a sip. The taste burns your throat but fills your chest with warmth. The world sharpens, colors pop, sounds deepen. You can hear the wind moving through sand grains like whispers. The shepherd beside you grins, his eyes gleaming gold in the fading light. The gods ride the wind, he says. If you listen long enough, you'll hear them laugh. And you do. For a brief second, the desert hum turns into music. Low, ancient, cosmic. You blink, and it's gone, leaving you dizzy and oddly content. The sun sets and firelight takes over. Around you, the drinkers start telling stories. Myths of monsters, heroes and gods who walked among men. It's impossible to tell where fact ends and fantasy begins, and maybe that's the point. For the ancient mind, intoxication wasn't about escaping reality. It was about expanding it. And maybe, just maybe, that hasn't changed. Because even now, thousands of years later, people still drink, smoke, or seek something to make life shimmer just a little more. To feel, if only for a moment, that there's something bigger than their own heartbeat. As the stars appear, cold, white, endless, you lie back in the sand. The taste of barley still on your lips. The fire crackles, laughter drifts through the night. And you realize that this scene, right here, has been replayed for millennia. Different names, different drinks, same yearning. Humans don't just want to survive. They want to feel alive, and sometimes that means getting a little high with the gods. The next morning dawns hazy and golden, and you find yourself in a place that smells faintly of poppies and damp clay. The air is thick, almost syrupy, and the sound of slow chanting drifts from a nearby courtyard. You've wandered into ancient Mesopotamia, land of kings, scribes, and as it turns out, the original drug dealers of history. A clay tablet lies before you, carved with cuneiform markings that look more like tiny bird tracks than writing. When you tilt it toward the light, a translation whispers in your mind, the plant of joy. That's what they called it, the poppy. The same flower that would one day blanket European fields after wars. But here, it's a symbol of pleasure, healing, and communion with the divine. The Sumerians cultivated it not just for medicine, but for transcendence. Opium wasn't merely a painkiller, it was a portal. You follow a robed priest into a dimly lit chamber. Inside, clay jars line the walls, sealed with wax and marked with symbols of the goddess Gula, patron of healing. The scent inside is sweet and earthy, crushed petals, resin, and something faintly metallic. The priest dips a reed into one of the jars and brings it to his lips, inhaling the fumes with a slow, deliberate breath. His pupils widen, his expression softens. He's somewhere else now. You can almost feel the shift. The room hums with low energy, as if ancient prayers are still vibrating in the air. The priest begins to murmur fragments of verses, half medical, half mystical, to ease the heart, to calm the body, to speak with the unseen. It's mesmerizing and also a little eerie, because you realize that every civilization, no matter how far apart, has discovered some way to quiet the ache inside their heads. The Sumerians passed the poppy's secret to the Babylonians, then the Egyptians, who called it the plant of sleep. By 1500 BCE, it was being traded up and down the Nile like treasure. The Egyptians even buried poppy pods in tombs. Because who knows? Maybe the afterlife would be more bearable with a little buzz. Scholars still argue whether these early users fully understood addiction or simply saw it as divine dependence. Either way, they kept coming back for more. You imagine standing in an Egyptian temple courtyard, the sun high and merciless, as priests grind poppy latex into a dark resin. The sound of pestles echoes through the air. Gold jewelry gleams. A woman in a linen dress carefully measures, drops into a small alabaster jar. For medicine, yes, but also for ritual. Nearby, a patient lies on a reed mat. His breathing slows. His pain dissolves. For the first time in weeks, he smiles. You can see why they called it the plant of joy. Then the scene shifts. Centuries pass in a blink. And now you're in a Hellenistic apothecary. Shelves of powders, oils, and roots fill the room. A Greek physician scribbles notes on papyrus. Opium brings sleep, eases sorrow, lightens the soul. His assistants boil, crush, and mix with almost musical precision. One of them sneaks a taste, a drop too much, and leans back, eyes fluttering. He laughs quietly to himself. For a moment, you can tell he's somewhere between this world and another. You can't help but smile. Humanity hasn't changed much, huh? But the poppy wasn't just about pleasure or pain relief. For some, it was a spiritual weapon, a way to face mortality with grace. Imagine a warrior bleeding out on a battlefield, being given a dose of opium to ease his passing. The line between comfort and transcendence blurred completely. And it's strange, almost poetic, that something so small, so fragile-looking, could unlock such vast experiences. You pluck a single poppy petal and hold it to the light. It glows like a tiny flame. For thousands of years, people worshiped that glow, not knowing that one day, it would lead to morphine, heroin, and entire wars fought over who controlled it. The poppy's history isn't just about euphoria. It's about empire. The same resin that soothed pain also fueled greed. Kings taxed it, merchants smuggled it, and priests still called it holy. You walk past rows of drying plants, your fingers brushing the soft pods. You wonder if those ancient growers knew they were cultivating both relief and ruin. Maybe they did and chose relief anyway. The priest from earlier finds you again, smiling faintly. His voice is a whisper. Every gift has two faces. It depends which one you choose to see. As night falls, the courtyard glows with oil lamps. You sit beside a bowl of burning herbs, the sweet smoke rising toward the stars. You inhale, and suddenly, the world tilts just a little. Not enough to lose balance, but enough to feel light. It's a quiet high. Not laughter, not chaos, just calm. You can feel the hum of ancient life around you. The soft buzz of cicadas, the whisper of sand, the slow rhythm of your own heartbeat. You think about all those before you. Shamans, priests, farmers, healers, chasing the same thing. Relief, wonder, meaning. Maybe it's not about getting high at all. Maybe it's about getting closer to something deeper, softer, timeless. And as you close your eyes, the poppy field fades into red dust and gold air. Somewhere far away, a temple bell rings. The gods are quiet tonight, but they're still watching. The air grows thicker, warmer. You blink and find yourself on a marble staircase leading up to a vast stone temple. White pillars gleaming under the sun, and the faint scent of sulfur drifting through the air. You've arrived in ancient Greece, though this isn't the Greece of toga. Parties and philosophers, quoting themselves on marble benches. This is the mystical Greece, the one that whispers prophecies through smoke. You climb the steps toward the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, where mortals came seeking answers from the gods. The view from here is unreal. Rolling green valleys, olive trees like rippling sea foam, and the mountains standing tall like watchful giants. But beneath all that beauty lies something darker, a fissure in the earth that exhales invisible gas. You hear a soft voice inside the temple, rhythmic and strange, like someone half talking, half dreaming. You follow it into the gloom. Torches flicker. The marble glows amber. A young woman sits on a tripod stool, her body tense, her eyes half rolled back. She is the Pythia, the Oracle of Delphi. People travel for months just to ask her questions. Will I win the war? Will my crops grow? Will I ever be happy? You kneel near the edge of the chamber. The air burns your nostrils. It's thick with something chemical, metallic, almost dizzying. You can taste the gas on your tongue. The oracle rocks slightly, murmuring nonsense. Then suddenly her voice deepens, echoing like a cavern. The god speaks through smoke. You get chills. Later you'll learn that this wasn't just divine mystery, it was geology. Scientists found that the temple sits directly over two fault lines releasing ethylene gas, a mildly hallucinogenic vapor. The oracle wasn't mad or possessed, she was high. You lean against the wall, lightheaded as her attendants fan her with peacock feathers and collect her words on wax tablets. The devotees around you whisper and tremble. The air feels charged, like thunder waiting to strike. And as strange as it seems, it makes perfect sense. The ancient Greeks didn't separate the sacred from the sensory. To them, altered states weren't a problem. They were proof of connection. The oracle's visions weren't hallucinations. They were messages. You watch her exhale slowly, her body relaxing. When she opens her eyes, they're calm again. Ordinary, almost tired. Someone hands her a cup of honeyed wine. She takes a sip, smiles faintly, and the spell breaks. You step outside, gulping in fresh air. The sun hits your face, and the world feels almost too bright, too vivid, like the gods turned up the contrast. You walk through a grove of laurel trees, Apollo's favorite. Their scent sharp and green, grounding you back in the human world. As you wander, a group of men sit beneath a colonnade, arguing, loudly, passionately, and beautifully. You recognize their words, Dionysus. They're debating whether the god of wine and ecstasy was divine liberation or dangerous chaos. One man slams his fist on the table. "When you drink, you touch truth," he shouts. Another retorts, "No, you drown in illusion." Scholars still argue the same thing today. You can't help but chuckle. Some things never change. Humans still fight about whether being high means finding yourself or losing yourself. A jug of wine sits nearby, and one of the men gestures for you to join. You pour a cup and take a sip. It's dark, rich, sweet. But then there's something more. They've mixed in myrtle, ivy, and honey, a potion designed to elevate the spirit. The taste blooms on your tongue, heady and floral. Your vision softens at the edges. Laughter surrounds you. Music starts, a flute, a lyre. Someone recites lines from Euripides. He who knows how to celebrate the god is wise. You sway to the rhythm, feeling your body loosen, your mind expand. It's not a drunken blur. It's clarity, warmth, surrender. The wine doesn't dull, it awakens. You think of the oracle again, inhaling fumes in her sacred chamber, and realize it's the same pursuit, the same human instinct, to leave behind the dull edge of existence and slip into something divine. The Greeks called it enthusiasmos, literally, to be filled with the god. You smile, realizing how fitting that is. The modern world might call it being tipsy, high, or euphoric, but back then, it was holy possession. As night falls, you wander down to the coast. The waves shimmer under the moonlight, and fishermen laugh as they pass a clay jug between them. One tells you that Dionysus was born from Zeus's thigh, after his mortal mother was burned to ash, a god. Born from madness and fire. You laugh, because that sounds exactly like every hangover story ever. The stars ripple on the water. You lie back on the sand, your mind still buzzing faintly. Somewhere above, Apollo's lyre hums in the wind, and you can almost imagine Dionysus grinning down, cup raised as if to say, "You finally get it, don't you?" Yeah, you do. Because it's not about the wine or the smoke, or even the gas that makes the oracle tremble. It's about surrender, letting go of control, long enough to touch something infinite. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you realize that in every age, every culture, humans have always wanted the same thing, to feel the pulse of eternity, even for a moment. You wake to the sound of drums and deep, rhythmic primal. The air smells of earth and rain, thick with incense that burns your nose and makes your heart beat faster. When you open your eyes, you're no longer in Greece. You're in a vast green jungle, where mist clings to the trees and the world hums with life. Welcome to ancient Mesoamerica, home of gods, jaguars, and sacred mushrooms. A procession winds through the forest, their skin painted with ash and ochre. Feathers shimmer in the dim light. You follow them into a clearing where a stone altar waits, covered with offerings, maize, cacao, and small clusters of brown and gold mushrooms. Teonanacatl, the flesh of the gods. A shaman sits cross-legged, his eyes closed, face calm but electric with purpose. Around him, people kneel in silence, holding mushrooms in their hands as if they're holy relics. You can hear the rain beginning to fall, soft and steady. Then the chanting starts, low, circular, hypnotic. You take a bite. The taste is bitter, earthy, almost metallic. A few moments later, the forest starts breathing. Colors deepen. The shaman's voice seems to come from everywhere at once. Inside your chest, above your head, in the ground beneath your feet. The trees bend and sway like dancers. A jaguar's roar echoes in the distance, and somehow it feels like part of the song. You look down at your hands. They're glowing. Or maybe the air is glowing around them. You can't tell anymore. And this is how the ancients touched the gods. Not through temples or scrolls, but through the veins of nature itself. Scholars still argue whether these mushroom rituals were religious or medicinal. But standing here, it's hard to separate the two. The people aren't escaping reality. They're amplifying it. Every heartbeat feels like thunder. Every shadow moves with intention. The shaman begins to speak, slowly, rhythmically, as if translating for another voice. The world breathes. You breathe. There is no difference. His words sink into you like roots. The world expands. And suddenly you're not just standing in a jungle. You are the jungle. The river in the distance flows through your veins. The trees inhale when you exhale. For the first time, you understand why these rituals weren't just drug trips. They were revelations. Time stretches. Rain falls in slow motion, each droplet glowing like molten glass. Faces blur and reform. Somewhere nearby, someone laughs softly, and a warm, human sound that cuts through the divine haze. You close your eyes and see patterns. Spirals, serpents, suns. The same shapes carved into temple walls thousands of years later. It's strange to realize that maybe those carvings weren't art at all. Maybe they were visions. Eventually the chant fades. The shaman sprinkles water over the altar and whispers something to the sky. The world steadies. The glow softens. You're left with a lingering warmth in your chest, like you just survived a storm that was half inside you. You help gather the remnants, bits of mushroom, drops of melted wax, petals scattered on wet stone. The people smile at one another, gentle and tired, as if they've all just returned from the same dream. When night falls, torches flicker along a stone pathway leading to a temple that rises like a black silhouette against the stars. You climb the steps slowly, your feet slipping on wet moss. From the top, the jungle stretches endlessly, green on black, life on shadow. Lightning flashes somewhere far away, lighting up the horizon for just a moment. You think about how these people, without books, without science, somehow understood that the universe wasn't something out there. It was something to merge with. And maybe that's what all ancient highs were really about. Not escape, but union. Centuries later, Spanish conquerors would call these practices heresy, outlaw the mushrooms, burn the temples, and silence the chants. But the echoes never died. Even today, in small villages across Mexico, descendants of those shamans still perform the same rituals, still eat the same flesh of the gods. The world moves on, but the hunger for transcendence never fades. You sit there on the temple's highest step, the wind playing with your hair, the jungle pulsing below. You realize that the people who came before us weren't primitive. They were explorers of the mind. And they didn't need technology or laboratories to find infinity. They only needed a mushroom, a song, and a little faith. A faint smile touches your lips as you whisper into the night. The gods were in the forest all along, and maybe they still are. When you open your eyes again, the air is thick with perfume, warm, spicy, and golden. You're standing in a temple courtyard bathed in sunlight, the kind that makes everything shimmer just a little too much. Stone pillars rise around you, their tops decorated with carvings of winged lions and suns. You've arrived in the ancient Near East, where smoke itself was sacred, the smoke of the sun. Priests and priestesses move gracefully around bronze censers, each trailing ribbons of white, smoke that twist and dance in the air like living spirits. The scent is rich, frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and resin from faraway lands. You inhale, and it's intoxicating. Not like alcohol or mushrooms, but soft, slow, creeping. It settles behind your eyes, quiets your thoughts, and makes your body feel a little lighter than it should. You're not the only one. The people around you, nobles, merchants, farmers, all sway gently, eyes half closed, lost in the rhythm of the smoke. The temple musicians play low, steady beats on framed drums, their sound rising and falling like breathing. This is how prayers reach the heavens, you realize. The ancients believed smoke was a bridge, a ladder between mortals and gods. And the more fragrant the smoke, the faster your words traveled. A priest sprinkles a handful of powdered gold into a brazier, and the flames flare bright. turning the smoke into glittering clouds. You can almost imagine the gods leaning down to inhale. The strange part, it works. You actually feel closer to something vast and benevolent and patient. The priest smiles faintly when he sees your dazed expression. The gods listen best when the air is sweet, he says. His voice sounds distant, almost echoing, and when your heart is quiet. He hands you a small bundle wrapped in linen. Inside are crumbs of resin and dried petals. For purification, he explains, for remembering that the divine is not above you, but around you. You drop a piece onto the fire. The smoke rises, thicker now, richer, and suddenly the courtyard fades. You're not standing in stone and sunlight anymore. You're floating through a soft, golden haze that smells like honey and desert wind. The shapes in the smoke begin to shift. Faces, wings, symbols. A lion's head, a serpent's coil, a crown of light. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. It's alive. And then just as suddenly it's gone. The smoke clears, leaving only the faint scent of burnt resin and the quiet hum of chanting. You blink, disoriented but calm. This isn't a hallucination, you realize. It's meditation by another name. The incense doesn't push you out of your mind. It pulls you deeper in. Across history, incense and smoke have always carried that dual meaning, spiritual and chemical. Ancient Egyptians burned kiphi, a mix of wine, honey, myrrh, and herbs, not just to please gods, but to help them dream vividly. The Hebrews used sacred incense in their temples, a blend so potent that ordinary citizens were forbidden from recreating it. And in China, Taoist monks spent lifetimes perfecting formulas of sandalwood and musk, designed to elevate the soul, which in practice meant lightheaded euphoria. Scholars still argue whether these recipes were symbolic or deliberately psychoactive. The truth, like the smoke itself, probably lies somewhere in between. You watch as another priest carries a smoking censer through the crowd. The people reach out to wave the scented air toward their faces, as if catching a piece of holiness. Their eyes gleam. Their lips move in whispers. It's a quiet kind of intoxication, communal, reverent, slow burning. And as you watch the smoke curl and twist, it hits you. This might be humanity's most ancient high of all, the simplest, cleanest one. Just breathe in, exhale, repeat. You think about modern incense, aromatherapy, even the smell of burning wood on a cold night. It's the same instinct, the same need to anchor the body and free the mind. The priest returns, his face streaked with ash. He bows slightly. Now you understand, he murmurs. To feel close to the divine, one must learn how to burn. You smile. That's oddly poetic for someone who smells like a campfire. As the ceremony ends, you step outside into the dry heat. The world feels different, sharper, more golden, like someone quietly turned the saturation up. You can still smell the incense clinging to your clothes, faint and comforting. The horizon glows red as the sun sinks. Somewhere in the distance, a caravan moves across the dunes, carrying jars of resin and bundles of herbs, proof that even in trade, humanity's oldest addiction was not wealth or power, but transcendence. You walk away slowly, trailing a wisp of smoke behind you. The wind carries it upward, scattering it into the sky. For a moment, you imagine it rising forever, until it reaches some vast unseen ceiling where the gods breathe it in and smile. You wake up to the sound of distant drums and laughter, a kind of feverish rhythm, echoing off wet stone. When you open your eyes, you're surrounded by torchlight, and the air smells like roasted grain, sour fruit, and something sharp and herbal. You're in a Minoan or early Greek festival, long before democracy and marble temples, when gods were worshipped in caves and forests, and getting high was a sacred duty. Men and women dance wildly around a fire pit, their tunics flying, hair tangled with vines. Some hold cups of dark sweet liquid, the ancient wine of Dionysus. But it's not the wine, you know. This is thick, almost syrupy, infused with herbs that twist your senses and make the stars sway. You take a sip when someone offers you a cup. The taste is strange, honey and smoke and bitterness. It hits fast. The world tilts slightly and colors grow richer. The flicker of fire seems to stretch, curling into patterns that look almost alive. The woman beside you laughs. You feel it, don't you? She says. Her eyes are bright, reflecting the flames. The god enters through the blood. Dionysian worship wasn't about quiet prayer. It was about losing yourself completely. You didn't talk to the god. You became him. The ancient Greeks called it enthusiasmos, literally, having the god within you.